Alrighty, everybody, welcome into the Wavy Plus studio. We've got another episode of Hang 10 for you. I'm your host, meteorologist Brian Michigan. It's just me today. We're riding solo here in the Hang 10 studio. The month of June, let's talk about that to start the show. We're going to also talk about surf etiquette today because I've been hearing it going around in the lineup across our area, especially in Virginia Beach, that this summer is the summer of the snake. A lot of people out there, especially beginners, which we won't talk down on them too much because obviously you got to start somewhere. But apparently dropping in and not really knowing the rules of the lineup has been kind of a problem locally for some of the surf spots. And of course, surfing is becoming a much more popular sport each year. So naturally, you're going to get some beginners out there, or maybe just people who may not know the rules of the lineup all that much, because there really is kind of an order that goes on out there. When you have so many people with all their surfboards kind of interacting with each other, you can kind of get some chaos sometimes. So we'll talk about that in a few moments, but also we're going to wrap up the month of June. As of today, when I'm filming this, it's June 30th, and you can kind of split June into two separate times. The beginning of the month, I'd say the waves were actually pretty fun. We had some consistent surf across the area. Temperature-wise, weather-wise, it was a bit of a cool start to the month. And then right around the mid-month to when summer officially started on the 20th, 21st-ish, we started to get this just big heat dome and high pressure sitting right over top of us, which usually doesn't add up to much swell across coastal Virginia and even into the Outer Banks. There's just not enough wind energy. There's no storms out there. And with kind of a quiet start to the hurricane season, we've been left with not much waves so far for the month of June. But again, you can kind of split it up. It was good, really, to start the month, and then to end the month, it's been a little slow. So you can kind of contribute that to an active pattern, transitioning then to a pretty quiet pattern weather-wise. So we've got some clips here that we're going to showcase. I managed to do a lot of traveling across our area. Virginia Beach, you'll see clips from the Eastern Shore. Managed to really go all throughout Virginia to surf this month, and I hope that within the next month coming up, maybe get some trips down to the Outer Banks once we get some more swell moving into the region. So again, it's been not too bad of a month. Been pretty fun to say the least. So enjoy some of this footage that I've compiled of a pretty fun month of June when it comes to waves, everything from shortboarding to longboarding, using the foamies. So yeah, enjoy it. We're gonna have some fun. You. Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back after the break, and some fun waves that we scored here in Virginia Beach and the Outer Banks through the month of June. You'll notice there in the video, I was wearing a wetsuit the entire time. That's because the sun is just so strong, and I'm trying to avoid the sunburn. So the water temperature has warmed up pretty quick. We started out the month in the 60s for the water temperature and ended it at the 80-degree mark. So it has been a crazy roller coaster ride when it kind of comes to the water temperature across our region. So yeah, pretty fun stuff. Hopefully July looks maybe a little bit better for waves across our area. Only time will tell. And really, this time of year, it depends on the tropics. It really depends on what kind of activity we see in the Atlantic basin. But with kind of how crowded the lineup can be, especially during the summer, you noticed it a little bit in the video. Packed crowds out there in the water that could cause some chaos. That's been the word that I've been choosing to use here to describe surf lineups in the summertime around here is chaos, because there's all these different types of people of all varying levels of skill trying to maneuver through one another to get to get a fun session in. So I guess the number one rule when it comes to surfing is to just not drop in. And essentially, dropping in on someone is when, there's someone down the line of a wave, down the shoulder, that doesn't have the right of way. Say someone's already up and surfing on the wave who sat at the peak and has priority. They start surfing down the wave, and someone further down than them jumps up onto the same wave without looking. You can never have more than one surfer on one wave at a time, or else you'll get collisions. You can, end up, there could be misunderstandings. A lot of times surfers, depending on where you are, or, you never know. Maybe some people could get aggressive, stealing their waves. It's a very territorial sport sometimes. But accidents do happen. Misunderstandings do happen in the sport of surfing, and injuries oftentimes will lead to mistakes like this in the lineup. Dropping in, boards hitting together, boards hitting other people, fins, the nose of a surfboard. They're not smooth areas to hit. It can, sometimes lead to cuts and other problems like that. So definitely want to avoid dropping in at all costs. Another thing to kind of consider, especially for maybe if you're a beginner surfer, kind of the rules of the lineup, you really just want to spend some time observing a surf spot. I'm going to pull up Jeffreys Bay, South Africa, for example here. This probably wouldn't be a spot that many beginners try to surf, but say you're a pretty decent surfer and you're on a surf trip. You're going to Africa, you're going to Indonesia, you're going to Central America, California. Say you're, arriving to a new surf spot, and you're not familiar with that spot. Maybe it's your first time there. You want to take the time to observe the breaks, see where the consistency is in the surf, see where everybody really lines themselves up. Because if you're unfamiliar with a place, you might not surf it as well unless you put some time into studying the wave. But also you could end up putting yourself into a vulnerable situation with other guys on waves. You certainly want to limit that kind of as much as possible. Also, you want to look for if every wave is being ridden. Is there enough waves out there to surf with you? If every wave's being taken, maybe a good idea to go find a new surf spot somewhere where the crowd is not as much of a factor, so you can actually get some more waves for yourself. Everybody, when they go out into a session, wants to catch as many waves as possible, but it's kind of hard to do that when the lineup is super, super crowded. Like Snapper Rocks, for example, one of the premier point breaks in the world, and oftentimes can get very crowded and with varying skill levels because of its sandy bottom. So it's a very welcoming looking wave out there. Also, it's good to probably talk to yourself, be honest with yourself. Is this circumstance something that I want to put myself into? Is this wave something that I can surf? And it all goes back to kind of this picture of Jeffreys Bay. This is a wave more for experienced surfers, maybe not so much for the beginner, getting a foam board, taking it out just for a casual session, learning to get to your feet. This is probably not the place you would do that. Just because this can be a bit of a gnarly wave. There's rocks underneath that wave. It's a fast wave as well. And most of the time, you're going to see a lot of really good surfers out there because just the shape of the wave is good for performance surfing. Maybe not so much for kind of learning how to surf if you're just taking the wave straight, riding it to the beach. So I guess it's important to just be aware of your skill level. Be honest with yourself. You'll find that learning to surf is much easier when you put yourself in an environment that's good for, kind of learning. So that's kind of that. If you're a beginner, best to take it's baby steps. Surfing is a sport that takes a long time to learn. In many cases, many years of surfing. So with that, we get into kind of surf etiquette, because there's kind of a way to do things when you're out in the lineup, especially when it's crowded. Now, who has the right of way? That's probably one of the most important things to kind of look out for. The fundamental rule kind of in surfing is that the surfer which is closest to the peak of the breaking wave is who gets priority. But not only that, but the surfer at the peak who is the furthest out in the lineup also kind of gets the priority. We see this picture here. There's two surfers that are kind of going for this wave. The surfer on the right side of the picture, that guy has priority. You can tell the wave is breaking right where he is. That's the peak of the wave. The guy kind of further down to the left, he's on the shoulder of the wave. So he's still going for it. He just doesn't have the right of way because he's not on that main peak. So if you ever come into a situation where you see a guy on the peak of the wave where the wave starts to break and he's standing up already, it's best to let that one go. That's his wave. That's her wave. And you don't want to drop in, because that could lead to, again, a situation where there could be misunderstanding. There could be, collision of boards, and we want to minimize that at all costs. If you're going right on a wave, so this surfer in this example is going right, then you want to be to the farthest left. It kind of seems opposite. You want to be as far left as possible. So if you're surfing at a wave like Jeffreys Bay, which is a right, you want to always be looking over your left shoulder to see, is there someone else coming down the line? Because if there is, you're going to want to pull back from that wave. If the wave is a left, it would be the opposite. You'd be looking over your right shoulder. So the person the furthest right on the peak of the wave will have priority in that example. Here's a good way to kind of break down. This is a photo of me surfing in New Jersey a couple years back. Kind of the peak and then the shoulder. The peak of the wave there, that's where I ended up taking off on this wave. This picture was taken as I was kind of going down the line a little bit. But where that right red X is, that is the peak of the wave. The surfer who is in that position has the priority. The person on the shoulder, you always look before you go. And if there's nobody going, if there's no one on the peak, then you can go. If you're the furthest one left in this example, this is a right breaking wave. We always say rights and lefts as if you're looking towards the beach. So if you're looking towards the beach, paddling into a wave, and it's a right breaking wave, that would be this example. Of opposite is if it's a left. So if you're on the shoulder, you kind of have to look before you go. It's kind of like looking before crossing the street at a busy intersection or something like that. You always want to be on your toes there. Additionally, the surfer the furthest out in the water has the right of way, unless they're not at the peak or if they're on the shoulder or something. You always want to make sure you're kind of at the peak of the wave. Now, also dropping in is probably it's a pretty well-known thing to happen in the sport of surfing. It happens all the time, whether it's on purpose or on accident. Most of the time it is on accident. We want to definitely limit that. Remember, one man or one woman to a wave. If someone's already up and riding on the wave, that's known as, and someone drops in, that's known as burning. We call that burning in the sport. It can many times lead to some, miscommunication. A lot of times it can be, it's one of the more disrespectful things you can kind of do in the sport of surfing. So you gotta always remember paddling with your head on a swivel, and also kind of knowing, if you're maybe not too familiar with a certain surf spot, maybe hold back a little bit and ask some people who maybe seem more familiar with that spot some advice, how the lineup works, how the order goes, because in many cases, depending on the break you're at, it can be kind of difficult to figure out the order of a certain lineup. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to kind of talk about that communication in the lineup, and also what is snaking or back paddling in the lineup. Those are two more things that are really important when it comes to knowing the rules of the lineup and how you can kind of stay out of trouble when you're out for a surf session. So we'll be right back. Alrighty, welcome back everybody to Hang 10. We're talking about surf etiquette because especially this time of year, it's pretty important, especially in Virginia Beach, Outer Banks, pretty popular areas to surf along the East Coast. And it's the summertime. It's warm out. Everybody's getting out onto the beach, so increased beach volume, more people vacationing, more people want to learn how to surf. So the lineups are kind of filling out. It's not cold anymore like the winter season. So those hardcore surfers who go through the winter time, that's kind of the best time to surf with the least crowds. In the summertime, certainly more welcoming, to say the least. So again, we're talking about surf etiquette, and now we're going to start to talk about, because we've covered who has priority in a lineup. Always the surfer furthest out and on the peak of the wave. The person on the shoulder, you got to keep your head on a swivel, making sure you're looking right and left to make sure there's no one coming down the line of the wave that you want to go at. Now, back paddling is also something that's pretty common, especially at crowded lineups for beach breaks, especially where the peak of a wave might not be very apparent. This picture here is an example of a beach break. I'll pull up once again this picture of Jeffreys Bay. This is a point break. This is a wave that it can be pretty obvious what the order of the lineup is. As you go right on the screen where the wave is breaking, that's kind of dictating the priority, because as you go down the wave to off to the left of your screen on this picture, the priority, you don't have priority there. You're on the shoulder of the wave. You want to get as far right in this picture as you can towards the breaking wave or towards the peak of the wave. In beach breaks, it can be very, confusing because sets shift from sandbar to sandbar. So you kind of get just a big mass of people that kind of surge into one area, and waves will kind of be breaking really without much order. Sometimes if there's a decent sandbar, there is some order. Virginia Beach, the First Street Jetty typically does have that, so it's a little bit more obvious to tell where the takeoff spot is on a wave. But in many other sandbars across our area, that might not be the case. They kind of break. Certainly some swells, they kind of break all over the place. So it's common in these types of lineups, and this happens when you kind of paddle around or underneath certain surfers to get closer to the peak. So you're essentially, by back paddling, you're cutting in line of other people who have priority ahead of you. So definitely want to avoid that and really just be aware of what you're doing when you're paddling for waves, because it can be very easy, especially on a really good day, to get ahead of yourself in the lineup and to maybe not wait your turn. Maybe you're really excited, you really want to get that next wave, and then to just kind of cut the line. Again, it's more obvious with a point break, but not so much with a beach break like this example. A place like Snapper Rocks, it's a little bit more obvious. As you go down the beach here in this example, you can kind of see that clump of surfers to the right of the screen. The person who's the furthest out and closer to the breaking portions of the wave where it kind of turns into whitewater, he has priority. The guys further up that picture, up the beach, they have to wait before all these people go ahead of them. Again, you got to think of it as a line. You never want to cut in line, whether it's for surfing or you're at you're in the line for fast food, for ice cream, whatever the case may be. You're in line. Maybe you're in your car and you cut someone off. You're cutting the line. You don't want to do that. So that's what kind of back paddling is, and that's pretty common, especially in our area. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of tension in the lineup here locally has been lying this summer, because it's been so warm recently and there's been such a packed lineup. So always also hold on to your board, especially when it could get really crowded out there in the lineup. You never want to be the reason someone gets hurt by, tossing your board. Say a big set's coming in, you're a little bit scared. You want to get under that wave as much as you can. Some people may ditch their boards, and that's not safe, because a board can almost be used as a weapon. It's a very heavy and big object, and if that comes loose off your feet, that could really hurt someone. So that's another thing that you want to look out for, especially as we get later on this summer into the heart of the hurricane season. That can really be a factor when the swell gets a little bit bigger. Also, be open to communication in packed lineups. You want to really make it known which way you're going. On a point break, it's going to be pretty obvious because the wave only breaks in one direction. But at a beach break where it can break both right and left, you want to be communicating with other guys in the lineup. Say a wave's coming and it's we call these waves A-frames, ones with both a left and a right break. You want to be, talking to everybody in the lineup. Hey, I'm going to go right on this one. I'm going to go left. And then you want to make sure you coordinate with other people who are going for the wave to get into position. So again, this is, typically for waves with an A-frame type of break. It's also just good to communicate with other surfers. Kind of back to what I was saying earlier with if you're kind of new to a lineup, talk to someone who is a local. They'll kind of tell you the inside secrets, maybe if you're lucky, of a certain wave, kind of how the lineup operates. If it's a point break, is there a steady flow of people that go to the peak of the wave, and once they surf, do they go to the end of the line? Kind of that sort of thing. And it could also help to kind of maybe build relationships out in the lineup. It's always good to have someone that out there. That way, everybody can kind of keep everybody in check. No one's cutting in line. No one's dropping in on each other's waves. And you can overall just raise the stoke levels of that lineup. Everybody wants to be having fun. It's just good to do it in a safe way, in the best way possible. So this could also help to kind of avoid collisions. We want to ultimately avoid that. People getting hurt because everybody just wants to go out to surf. And, no one wants to come out with an injury. So we're all just having fun out here in the lineup. So again, just to kind of reiterate, the peak, that's the surfer that has priority. You never want to back paddle to cut in line to get to that main priority spot. You always got to take your time, especially when surfing a crowded lineup. Respect goes a long way. And that kind of leads me to my final point here. Giving respect to others in the lineup will give you respect in return. Nobody likes to see the guy paddling out and just cutting the whole lineup, taking every single wave, and just completely ignoring the priority of a surf spot, especially for people who may not be from a particular surf spot. You kind of always want to see who the locals are, because a lot of times those are the people you want to maybe give the benefit of the doubt of when it comes to priority. Again, surfing is a kind of a weird sport. It's very territorial in many ways, so it's important to kind of know the rules of the lineup. Especially, again, it's the summer season after all, and everybody's getting out there and having a good time. So that's about it for this week's episode of Hang 10. It has been a very fun month of June. It ended up a little bit slow when it comes to the waves, but the lineups have certainly been filling up. So again, remember the rules of the lineup. Be safe out there and ultimately have fun. And hopefully as we go throughout July, we'll have some more swells on the way. Start to get out there into some more breaks. Hopefully the Outer Banks starts to get good over the next few weeks or so. We'll be keeping an eye on the tropics because it is the summer after all. Hurricane season is in full swing. And remember those rules of the lineup and have fun out there. I will see you all in the lineup.